Gaza's health ministry counts more than 72,000 people killed in the occupied enclave since Israel's onslaught began in October of 2023. And aid workers say Gaza's humanitarian crisis is worsening as damage to infrastructure and daily attacks have exacerbated the lack of food, water and health supplies. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, violence continues as Israel has announced plans to expand its powers in the occupied territory. We'll cover that story later in the show, but first, nuclear talks between Iran and the United States have resumed, but negotiations remain tense. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian gave a speech on Wednesday marking the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution.
ایران ما در مقابل زیادخواهی‌های آنها سرخم نخواهد کرد.
Our Iran will not bow to their excessive demands. Our Iran will not back down in the face of injustice and aggression. But we're in talks with neighboring countries with all our strength to promote peace and stability in the region.
What could these tensions between Tehran and Washington mean for regional and global stability? To discuss this and more, let's bring in our guests. Joining us now from Boston is Kaveh Afrasiabi. He is an Iranian-American political scientist and author specializing in Iran's foreign and nuclear affairs. And from Tehran, we're joined by Akbar Dareini. He is a researcher and writer at the Strategic Studies of Public Policy Journal. Thanks to both of you for being with us. Akbar Dareini, let me start with you. It's the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, but the commemorations this year are overshadowed to an extent by the demonstrations that took place just about a month ago. There were demonstrations on the streets of Tehran as well as other cities in Iran. It left thousands of demonstrators dead. It also left security force members dead as well. Iran accused the United States and Israel of fomenting some of what we saw on the streets of the country. So how would you describe the mood in Tehran right now?
Millions of Iranians took to the streets today. That is a manifestation of national solidarity despite economic hardships. President Pezeshkian apologized to the nation today, promising that he will do his best to tackle the problems, while a segment of the population doesn't believe in him. But despite hardships, millions of Iranians took to the streets. That is a manifestation of national solidarity. But Iran has also made it clear that it is for a dignified, balanced deal with the United States in return for the lifting of sanctions. If the Americans are prepared for that, Iran has not closed the door of diplomacy. But what Netanyahu is doing in Washington today is to sabotage the process of negotiations. The recent talks in Muscat was confined to the nuclear issue. Israel is upset and wants Trump to include Iran's missile program in the talks. That is designed to drag the United States into a war with Iran. So while Iran is working hard to alleviate pressures on the population, it is open for a dignified deal, but it is also prepared for any eventuality. Iran's military forces are on high alert for any eventuality.
Kaveh Afrasiabi, let's talk about those talks that have taken place here in Washington, D.C., those talks between the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump. The fate of Iran will be a focus of those talks. And as Akbar Dareini pointed out, and according to media reports in the United States, Netanyahu is concerned that President Trump might sign a deal with Iran, but that deal might not include things like restricting Iran's ballistic missile program or its support for groups like Hamas and Hezbollah in the region. What is your sense of what could happen next? I mean, the United States has deployed a considerable force in the region, in the Middle East. I mean, how likely is it that Iran, or rather the United States and Israel, could bomb Iran again?
Well, unfortunately, history seems to be repeating itself. Last year in June, Mr. Netanyahu unilaterally torpedoed an ongoing diplomatic negotiation between US and Iran. And he's now at it again, and we will see if he will succeed. And Israel is obviously addicted to this rent a superpower attitude in order to acquire regional hegemony. Because let's face it, the June war last year ended in a draw with air parity between Iran and Israel, and that's intolerable from the point of view of Israel and its regional ambitions. So it wants to end that fragile ceasefire that started June 24th last year and engage the US in another calamitous war. And hopefully, President Trump is wise enough not to fall into that trap because it will have serious repercussions for both the US national and national security interests as well as the US's regional allies, because Iran has made it very clear that their reaction to any US attack will be a regional warfare engulfing a lot of US allies in the region, and this could have serious impact on global oil supply and so on and so forth. So I really think that Mr. Netanyahu's list of demands, which we have seen in the Israeli newspapers, is really unrealistic because he wants to limit the Iranian ballistic missiles range to 300 kilometers. And that raises, among other things, the issue of verification, because how do you verify other than having access to sensitive national security facilities of Iran? This would be capitulation, not negotiation, and obviously a big red line for Iran or any government, and totally unacceptable. So by posing these unrealistic, unacceptable demands, Mr. Netanyahu is hurling the US toward a war of choice and not of necessity. And this would be a very unpopular war in the US and a lot of opposition to it. And it will not be a quick war. It will probably last a couple of weeks or longer and so on. And, who knows what the ramifications will be. But we can bet that it'll be a very serious new development causing regional destabilization, fragmentation, and so on. So I'm praying that Mr. Trump would be wise enough to stand up to Mr. Netanyahu and say no to him.
Ali Akbar Dareini, Iranian leaders have made it clear that the nuclear program in the country is a peaceful nuclear program. It's not about developing nuclear weapons. Here is President Masoud Pezeshkian. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We are not seeking nuclear weapons. We've stated this repeatedly, time and again, and we're ready for any kind of verification.
So, Ali Akbar Dareini, do you think that will placate the United States and Israel, or do you think they're seeking much more? I mean, there are elements here in Washington that are talking about regime change in Iran.
If the Americans are realistic and are seeking a fair, balanced deal, yes, there is a way forward. Iran and the US can reach a deal in one single day. No nuclear weapons, lifting of sanctions, and you have the deal. But if the Americans insist on unrealistic demands, such as missiles, no sane government will hand over its defensive power in a silver plate to its enemy. It's very obvious that Iran will not agree to that. And such demand is a coded message to drag the United States into a disastrous war with Iran. That's why Israel and Netanyahu are insisting on that, because they don't want a deal. They want US to attack Iran. But Iran's military strategy has changed. The delayed, limited, symbolic retaliation Iran showed in the previous attacks don't work for Iran anymore. If a war happens, if the US attacks Iran again, it will be a war of survival. So Iran has made it clear that if it is attacked, whether it's a limited war or a larger scale war, it will retaliate massively, and it will lead to a regional, costly, bloody war with unimaginable consequences. So Iran is open for a dignified nuclear deal, but Iran will not surrender. Iran will not capitulate to America's unrealistic demands if Trump is going again to fall into Netanyahu's trap. And what Trump said today suggests that he is again falling into that trap. So Iranian military strategists are preparing for war, while Iranian diplomats keep the door of diplomacy open in case there is a way to avoid war.
Okay, Ali Akbar Dareini, you say if there is an attack that there will be massive retaliation by Iran, but would Iran be prepared to take on a regional power, Israel, that is widely believed to have hundreds of nuclear missiles?
The cost of capitulation, the cost of surrender is way more than war for Iran. So if Iran is going to be attacked this time, whether by the US first or Israel first or a combination of the two, it is a war of survival. And Iran will use all its power, all its capabilities to make sure that the Americans will get a bloody nose. Iran will suffer. But Iran is making big preparations for the possibility of war. But it is not seeking war. It is open for a dignified deal. But if Iran is attacked, there is no choice. Iran knows how to defend itself. Israel doesn't enjoy strategic depth. And Iran has already prepared plans how to respond to both Israel and the US. If Iran is attacked, Iran does not possess intercontinental ballistic missiles to hit the US mainland. So it will target America's military bases in the region. All American assets in the air, on land, and at sea will be legitimate targets. So Iran has made large preparations for the worst scenario, but it is hoping that diplomacy can prevent that. The big problem here is Netanyahu, who is actively seeking to draw the United States into a disastrous war.
Yeah. Kaveh Afrasiabi, let's talk about the diplomatic efforts that are being made. There were those talks that were held between Iran and the United States in Oman. Now President Trump says there will be another round of talks that will take place next week. Are you hopeful that these talks could reach some kind of satisfactory agreement for both sides?
I'm cautiously optimistic because on the nuclear issue, there are, positive signs. I was advisor to Iran's nuclear team back in 2004 when Iran made an agreement with the European three, Germany, France, and England, whereby Iran, for a period of time, suspended its enrichment activities as a confidence-building measure. And now we hear the Foreign Minister Araghchi saying that Iran is intent on preserving its right to enrich, but that's slightly different from engaging in continuous enrichment. So my hunch is that, particularly with the intervention of the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council in this matter, Mr. Ali Larijani, who has proved in the past to be a very pragmatic thinker, that Iran is willing to make compromises on that issue and perhaps freeze its enrichment activities for a period of time, and that would be negotiated. The problem with the negotiation right now is to enlarge the agenda and include the non-nuclear conventional military capability of Iran, to be exact, the ballistic missile program. And the ideas that are floating around, as I said, are completely unrealistic because they will require access to very secret underground, they're called missile cities that are off limit, obviously for national security reasons. and these are for legitimate military defense.
I've got less than a minute left, but how are other countries in the region watching this, especially the Gulf states?
All Arab states, Iran's neighbors, are extremely concerned about the possibility of a war because whether they like it or not, they are hosting American bases, and Iran will attack those bases, and it will be disastrous for the entire region. So right. They are talking to Iran, and they are talking to the United States and pressuring the United States not to listen to war criminal Netanyahu, not to seek Iran's capitulation, but go for a balanced deal. So they are supporting to avoid war.
Okay, and we have to leave it there. Ali Akbar, Dareini, Kaveh Afrasiabi, thanks to both of you for joining us.
My pleasure.
You're welcome.
We now continue our conversation, taking a look at the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The conflict has already claimed the lives of more than 72,000 people, while violence in the West Bank intensifies. Now there is international outrage over Israel's announcement to expand its powers in the occupied territory that at least one Israeli minister describes as sovereignty de facto. Let's bring in our DC-based panel to discuss this further. Dan Arbell is a scholar in residence at the Center for Israeli Studies at American University, and Khalil Jahshan is the executive director of the Arab Center right here in Washington, D.C. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Khalil, let me start with you. As we've been reporting, the death toll in Gaza is now at 72,000 people killed by Israel. There's increasing casualties in the occupied West Bank as well. There are increasing attacks by settlers who are there illegally, as well as by the Israeli military forces who are there illegally as well. Now we have the Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, says the government has introduced policies that will make it easier for Jewish settlers to take Palestinian land. He said, we will continue to kill the idea of a Palestinian state. And we also have the Israeli energy minister, Eli Cohen. He says he plans, quote, sovereignty de facto, and establish a fact on the ground that will not be a Palestinian state. Where is all of this heading?
Basically, this is Netanyahu's answer to Trump. It was basically the message he wanted to make sure the White House gets before he arrives in town, as he already has done so, and he's meeting today with the president. And this is Israel's answer. His government has failed to achieve its declared objectives in Gaza. It's not happy with the plan that is unfolding in Gaza totally, and therefore he seems to be transferring, if you will, the conflict from Gaza to the West Bank. What he and his ministers that you just mentioned, it's not just Smotrich, but the defense minister, Katz, has been involved in that, which is a lot more serious than Smotrich. That signifies that the possibility of the conflict now moving totally to the West Bank, closer to the Israeli population, is much more realistic than it was before Sunday.
Dan, what is your opinion on that? Prime Minister Netanyahu will be telling President Trump at the White House, according to the Times of Israel, they're reporting that Netanyahu will tell Trump that Israel plans, well, one of the things Israel plans is another military operation, as it describes it, on Gaza. And we're seeing these statements by these ministers being made. What is the intention of all of this?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the domestic politics. Israel is now in an election year, 2026, maybe in June, maybe in October. And the far-right ministers and Likud ministers want to establish facts on the ground, before it's too late. And so we see these recent decisions on what Khalil described, which are very concerning, very disturbing, to advance de facto annexation of the West Bank. Trump is opposing it, but he's busy with other things, preoccupied with other things. The White House statements are surely opposing this, but they're not allowing it to. But it's not. They're not, putting a stop to it, and that's kind of a concern.
Khalil, Trump introduced the vaunted 20-point plan, which was going to be introduced in phases to bring the violence in Gaza to an end and to start reconstruction there. We haven't even seen much or any progress on phase one, which called for a ceasefire. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed since that ceasefire was announced last October. And to talk about phase two, which is the establishment of a technocratic committee, withdrawal of Israeli troops, the deployment of some kind of stabilization force. Is this plan now been abandoned?
Unfortunately, it hasn't been abandoned, even though it basically was born still. The administration continues to adhere to it. The meetings are continuing, but frankly, the process is not moving forward. Sorry. The way the president envisaged, because of Israeli, the Israelis creating problems in his way. What you refer to as the technocratic committee, which is kind of a subservient, actually, role given to the Palestinians under two other higher tiers of leadership controlled from the outside to please Israel. Even that committee hasn't been allowed to enter the territory, enter Gaza, to do its job. They had their initial meetings in Cairo, but they haven't been able to move their operation to the Gaza Strip as anticipated by the plan. So far, nothing has happened. What we are waiting now is the next meeting, which is on the 19th of this month here in Washington, to try to begin the fundraising process, if you will, for these next steps. But you would assume if we are to begin reconstruction, instead of seeing additional attacks like we did see today, killing 4 or 5 Palestinians in Gaza by the Israeli army, we should have had fundraising taking place the whole time since Davos. It's a bit too late to be doing that. So the chaos of the administration's effort has not helped propel that idea, even if they had good intentions to start with, in addition, of course, to the Netanyahu government creating impediments in the way of moving forward.
Right, and Khalil, what can you tell us about the humanitarian situation in Gaza right now? The Rafah border crossing between Egypt and Gaza was reopened. Much was made of that in the Western media, but aid deliveries were still limited even after that was opened.
You're right. Deliveries are still limited, even though the supply of basic goods, although at exorbitant prices, by the way, talking to family in Gaza, they admit that there are supplies that were short during the past 2.5 years seem to be more available, but at prices they can't afford at all. But more importantly, I think the fact that the Israelis are not cooperating at all with this plan and seem to be creating, as I said earlier, more impediments in the way have not helped. And the fact that they are not having, if you will, their words taken seriously here in Washington, maybe that's the reason why the Israeli Security Cabinet did what it did on Sunday, trying to put more pressure on Trump and his administration, that essentially, if you're not cooperating with us in Gaza and you're imposing a solution on Gaza that is not to our liking, then we'll create another problem for you in the West Bank.
Right. Dan, let's talk about the situation in Iran. Ostensibly, the reason for Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to Washington is to express his concerns to President Trump over what happens next in Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu is concerned that Trump might make a deal with Iran, but it might fall short of what the Israelis want. What do the Israelis want?
Yeah, so clearly Netanyahu invited himself to the White House a week earlier than planned in order to kind of try and convince the president not to go for a deal, at this point, or that if he does go for a deal, then this deal should include the following. First of all, zero enrichment for Iran. Iran needs to remove the enriched uranium, 408 kilograms of enriched uranium out of the country. Finally, also to establish a ongoing and ongoing set of inspections, including surprise inspections. So these are the Israeli demands. Israel, of course, wants the U.S. to limit Iran's ballistic missile program and its support for its proxies. But I think that the U.S. is focused on the nuclear file and does not have plans at the moment to broaden the scope to other issues. Also, the issue of, I think Netanyahu's main hope is that he can convince Trump to attack Iran. We're seeing a reluctance on behalf of the administration, or at least some parts of the administration. We heard J.D. Vance today, the vice president, say that it's the Iranians should topple their own regime, and not outsiders should be doing it. So clearly, there are different trends here inside the administration, some in support, like Rubio, others against, like J.D. Vance. And now he's trying to maneuver himself in that space, trying to convince the president to kind of side with his view of this, how to go about on this issue.
Dan, the Al Jazeera television network has just released a major investigation which shows Israel used thermal and what's known as thermobaric munitions. These are munitions that burn at 3,500 degrees Celsius. They use them against Palestinians in Gaza. When these weapons are used, nothing is left of a human being. They just completely evaporate. And according to information coming out of Gaza, almost 3,000 Palestinians were killed in this way. These weapons are banned internationally. How is Israel justifying the use of these kinds of weapons in what is the world's most densely populated area?
Anan, I've not heard about this until this moment. I've not heard that Israel is using such systems. I would be surprised to hear that it actually did so. I very much doubt the Al Jazeera report, and we'll wait to hear Israel's reaction to it. But it does not seem to me logical or that Israel would pursue such a method. And of course, if it did, this is very, very concerning and unacceptable. But I've not heard that actually happened.
Right. Khalil, let me get your opinion on this. This was a report which, as I said, was carried by Al Jazeera. Have you heard or seen any evidence of this?
Yes, actually, it's not just Al Jazeera. There are at least 15 other sources that are repeating the same allegations against Israel. It wouldn't be surprising to me, frankly. I'm not fully well versed in the technicalities of these types of weapon systems. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Israelis haven't used other systems that have basically been described as illegal before and prevented actually by international agencies from being used in war situations.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Thanks to both of you for joining us. And that's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.